it's working.
Okay. So can you please state your full name and your birth date?
Right. Glenn Patterson, Crone. And I was born May 17th, 1928.
Okay, and where were you born?
I was born outside of Buffalo, New York, a little bitty place, Lancaster. And then my father worked for the government, so we traveled extensively. As a matter of fact, I think it was 24 different cities we lived in before I went to high school.
And when did you come to Ashland?
I had been working overseas, and through most of the 50s. Well, see, I lived in Japan immediately after the war, and that was 2 years. And I liked foreign service, so I went to work for an oil company, Standard Vacuum Petroleum Maskapai, and worked in primarily Sumatra, some in Java, some Malaya, Hong Kong, Singapore, and did one assignment in London. I was basically, for want of a better way to explain it, I was a troubleshooter in government, public, and labor relations in Southeast Asia. I have some skills in terms of solving problems, and that's how I was utilized. Excuse me. But I was injured in Sumatra. I skidded off an embankment during a cloudburst, and 6 months later, on a Sunday morning, I couldn't walk. So I was hospitalized a total of 18 months. The 6 months traction, 3 months walking, 6 months walking body cast, 3 additional months in traction, 3 additional months in a walking body cast, and then they operated on me, exploratory, and they were able to correct it, and for the most part I have no problems. But under the circumstances, I didn't dare go back overseas because if something went wrong, I wanted to be near a good hospital. So I came back to the States, and then I was kind of burned out in the business world, and I decided I was going to be an actor. And several things brought me to the Richmond area. Number one is I'm a graduate of Cornell, and business of a type is my background. So Richmond is unique in that it's kind of insulated from financial problems. The lows aren't as low and the highs aren't as high. It's mainly because of diversification, so that was a good place to come. Second thing was I knew I wanted to get into performing, and when I was in the hospital in Singapore, there was a young lady that I was dating then who brought me a newspaper. Actually, she brought me several newspapers from the United States, and there was a picture, I will never forget it, of 2 girls, and the caption was 2 thespians working on an old tavern near Richmond, Virginia, that is going to become a theater. And I thought, golly day, now that sounds exciting. So now I long since lost that. It was, I remember it clearly, it was sepia, the brownish print that's used to see in the Sunday newspapers. At any rate, that was the second thing. And then when I talked it over with my brother, he said, well, now that's a great idea because I've got a church down there. So he's a graduate of Cornell, Westminster Choir at Princeton. And so he accepted a job down here, and then I came back and settled in Richmond. Then, after Sib and I, my wife and I, were married, quite honestly, there was a rape in our neighborhood, and we had the 3 little girls, and the children are my stepchildren, and we did not like the idea of the possibility of them being bothered, so we chose Ashland and moved out here.
Okay, and why did you choose Ashland?
Why? Well, it's a small town and historic. In driving around for weeks, we would go out on a Sunday with all the kids in the car. They hated it. But we would drive around, and of all the different neighborhoods The ones that were set up around the railroad are the ones that we kind of liked. Bonaire over on the south side was initially was a railroad setup, and this one definitely was, with the train coming right through the center of town. So it was very intriguing. We liked the buildings; they were quite beautiful, and then I liked the idea of being near a university because, well, it's kind of neat to be able to get into a good library now and then.
So you came here with your wife and your 3 kids?
Five
Children.
3 girls, 2 boys.
Okay, and so what actually made Ashland so special for you?
Well, the house that we found was exactly what we wanted.
Okay.
Big and old.
Okay, so if I can ask you a little bit about your family background, what was your grandparents like and your parents?
Okay, I'm Irish descent on both sides. The name Crone actually originally was probably Norwegian, and it was probably originally spelled Krohn. Then, of course, when the Vikings started moving, that was at the the beginning of the mini ice age, which would be 793 was the invasion of Lindisfarne, and then of course they moved into and settled in Ireland. So the one side was the Crones, and then the other side was the Pattersons. Now the Pattersons came from an area of Ballipitmar, which is not too terribly far from Tara in northeastern Ireland, and Tara historically is the legendary Sea of Kings. O'Neill held sway there, and he's the one that forced the Irish out, the Irish chieftains. They went over to Scotland, which was sparsely populated, and then when they came back under Cromwell, they were known as the Scotch-Irish. So, and my dad, so my mother's family would be considered Shanty Irish because they were indigenous. They stayed in Ireland. My father's family, the Crones, would have been classified as Scotch Irish because the clan was pushed over into Scotland and then came back under Cromwell. So as far as my grandfather on my mother's side, I don't know any of the people on my father's side. Oh, I mean, I know about the estate in Scotland that's still there and everything like that, but I have no connection with them. As far as my mother's family, my grandfather, he was the youngest of 7 children of a couple that had moved to the States. He was, I believe he was 57 when they came over. That would be my grandfather's father, and his wife was 58, a year older. So he was the youngest son, and so my grandfather was the youngest son. Nice guy, really nice guy. He ran a dairy farm outside of, or adjacent to Buffalo, and ran Holsteins and loved horses. Of course, that's traditional in Ireland almost. So Percherons are the ones that he really liked, the great big draft animals. And when I was little, he would pick me up and stand me up on top of these horses, and they were so flat and big that I could actually walk around on them. It was fun. They had a bit of an Irish accent, and my uncles used to tease him because he would be in the barn talking to the cows and the horses, and they'd say, who are you talking to, George? He'd say, a damned intelligent man, b'God. He was a funny guy, really nice man.
Okay. What are the traditions in your family, and did you save some of them with your family and preserve them?
Not really, with the exception of Christmas. Christmas has always been crucially important in my family, but an awful lot, actually, quite honestly, most of the things that we do in our family, the five children, my wife and them, is based on my wife's family. The Without going into a lot of detail, it was kind of a strange situation how my wife and I got together, and she had some difficulties that had to be taken care of in terms of a child abduction. So a lot of how things might have been were flavored by that. And quite honestly, what I tended to do was, not in a bad way, but I kind of sublimated what would have been important to me because of the situation that she had faced and we were facing together. Marriage is an incredible thing, I'll tell you. The concept of we is something that we don't give enough thought to. It's me, you, and when it really should be we.
Yeah. So you mentioned that the religion is very important to you. What is the religion in your family?
Well, my mother, surprisingly enough, even though they stayed in Ireland, they were Protestants, which was quite unusual. And I have no idea why they became Protestants, because traditionally, the most Irish that stayed in Ireland were Protestants. Of course, the clan that went over to Scotland and then came back, the clan itself was the Fergusons with a double S, and Crone was one of the offshoots. At any rate, traditionally they would have been Presbyterian, and probably were. I don't know definitively. My feeling on it has always been pretty simplistic. As I mentioned to you before, I was born a Baptist, brought up a Methodist, recruited into the Episcopal Church so I could sing in the boys' choir, liked the ritual, took instruction. It didn't take, but then when I married a Catholic girl, I mean, with 5 children, Lord, yes, because we're all going the same place. In examining Catholicism, there was no problem with me. I could become a Catholic without it offending any of the things that I believed.
So, did you go to church as a family?
Good Lord, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was it a big tradition for you every Sunday? Or?
Oh yes, always every Sunday, and now Sib and I. Well, we go to St. Anne's up here. We have a marvelous priest, Father Chris Haydinger. We used to kid him. We've known him 30 years. The kids used to call him Haydinger. Wonderful man. At any rate, we go regularly on Sunday, and then we go to morning mass normally on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
And so let's get back to Ashland. So when you came here, you were, how old were you?
Golly day, I have no idea. I probably could figure it out. See, one of the reasons why Ashland was important was I was working over at Barksdale, and it was a lot closer to drive from here over to Barksdale than it was to drive from the West End over here.
And what was like to work as an actor?
Oh, it's tremendous fun. Tremendous fun. I love it. When I was really little, my father, who of course, our family went through the crash. I was very little, but I remember the crash. As a matter of fact, one of the things that was just really stuck out in my mind is that my dad came home, and I was there, just a little bitty, but they talked to me a lot, read to me a lot, so I was aware, and my dad told my mother that they were going to cut his salary. I had no idea what salary was. I thought he meant celery, the vegetable. And I couldn't understand why my mother was crying because they were going to cut a vegetable. It just didn't make any sense. So, at any rate, you had asked me a question, and then I got carried away on that. I've forgotten what the question was.
The question is about Ashland. How old you were when you came here first?
I really don't remember. I don't remember.
Were you here during like the civil rights movements or anything like that?
Well, see, now wait a minute. I do know when I came to Richmond. I moved here December 23rd of 1960. And then I opened in my first show over at Barksdale July 7th of 1961. And I was in the chorus. And it was John Brown's Body. Excellent play, excellent play. And then since then, well, I've done roughly 150 professional productions, but I did, up until last year, I had done 87 plays at Barksdale. And it was kind of interesting. I had played in Barefoot in the Park, and I'd played Victor Velasco, 48 years old and a thoroughly nice fellow. I'd played him twice, and they were producing it last year. And one of the walk-ons got sick and couldn't appear. So they called me up and asked, because I was familiar with the play, would I do the walk-on? So I said, yes, I'd be glad to. And I did, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But it was 2 performances, and therefore I could classify it as a credit. And what's significant about it was I had done 87 shows prior to this. This would be the 88th credit there. And back in my service days, communication was not like it is today. And we used to have an inside numeric code where we could communicate expressions, feelings, and things like that without everybody knowing what it meant. And 88 means signed with love.
No.
I thought that was kind of neat. When I told my wife about it, I told her also that I was kind of looking for a postscript.
Okay, so you came to Ashland, and did you have any other jobs, or you were just acting?
Yeah, initially I went to work for an organization called the Virginia Council on Health and Medical Care. I think that's correct. They're defunct now, unfortunately, but that was headed up by a gentleman by the name of Edgar J. Fisher. The purpose of it was there were a lot of places in Greater Virginia that really didn't have adequate facilities, etc., in terms of medical care. So the Virginia Council was doing their best to recruit young doctors, some foreign, some fresh out of med school, and help them get established in these different communities around Virginia. So I went to work for them, and I was primarily a fundraiser. I traveled out to the western part of Virginia and would talk to business leaders and things like that, explain what we were doing. Face it, obviously, I have a gift of gab, and it's easy to talk, easy to communicate. So I raised a fair amount of money for them.
Okay, and you mentioned this big house. Where was the house? Does it still exist?
It was still there, yeah. It's on College Avenue. We looked at it in 1974. That's when our kids, I mentioned they had been abducted. They were still out of the country. And we looked at it then. It was priced at $29,000. Never forget this. And we liked it, but under the circumstances, since we didn't know where the children were and we knew they knew where we were, we didn't want to move. because suppose they tried to call or something like that. Probably a groundless fear, but it was there. So we didn't do anything about it. Then we got the kids back. I've forgotten. I think it was 1974. It was 2.5 years that they were gone. And we came back up to Ashland and looked at the house. Now it was priced at $49,000, $20,000 more. We went ahead and bought it. That would have been 1978. So we lived there for 8 years, got the kids through school, and then we decided that we wanted to, I had a little health problem there, and we decided that we would open a bed and breakfast. That would be something that I could do without straining myself physically. My wife would continue in real estate because we were in real estate by that time. And so we sold the house probably 1988, and I believe we got $85,000 for it. We relisted it after the man did some work on it, and as I remember, we resold it for $135,000 in less than a year. Then, just recently, I had occasion to talk to some people that know about what has happened. An addition was put on it. It's huge, and it's 401 College Avenue, and it's worth well over $300,000 now. It's amazing how the prices have gone up. Just amazing.
And how was the neighborhood back then?
Oh, very nice, very nice. Well, the president of Randolph-Macon was only a block away, and his kids and my kids played together. Yeah. Oh, Ashland, that's one of the neat things about Ashland. If you look at the statistics, you see that crime is fairly high. But the truth of the matter is the crime, we get credited for crime that occurs along the 95 corridor. And actually what happens in the town, almost no crime whatsoever. Of course, now with the drug situation, more of that is cropping up.
And what were the gathering places you visited?
Well, we, other than church and our relationship with the theater, see, when you're in theater, I mean, that's a full-time commitment. They frequently would be 6 nights a week, where you have to be over there at 5 o'clock because, see, I would wait tables. That was part of the, part of the attraction. People could know you as an actor, but they weren't placed in a difficult situation. They met you before they saw you on stage. So they didn't feel obligated to, if they didn't like your performance, they weren't embarrassed by not being able to say anything, if you follow what I mean. Mm-hmm. You meet them before, and it does not put them in a disturbing situation if they don't like what you did. Mm-hmm. So and we did that, and of course, made pretty decent money at it, all considered. Didn't make much acting because they couldn't afford to. They couldn't afford to pay us very much.
Do you have any Ashland stories?
Oh, let me see. Yeah, here's one. Now, I've dealt in real estate off and on since, I wrote my first contract in 1946, and but I was not dealing in it then. I didn't start that until, much, much later when we moved up here to Ashland. I had a license before, but I didn't do much with it. And that was in the early 60s. But when my wife decided to get into real estate, she listed a neat little property over on the railroad track. I've forgotten the name of the man who was there. Wonderful little older man. And he had been, I believe he was a graduate of Cornell, because I met them when we would have gatherings over there of Cornell alumni. So because of my knowing them, my wife ultimately met them at a Cornell gathering. And when he died, ultimately, the lady wanted to sell it, so she listed it with Sybil, my wife, and it was Sybil's first listing. So we advertised it, did everything you're supposed to do, and a man called us. I'm not going to mention his name because it's kind of embarrassing for him now, but he told my wife that he wanted this couple to come up and take a look at it, and he said, soft pedal the railroad. In other words, don't talk about it. Maybe they won't notice. And what he failed to realize is, to the Ashlander, that's high rent district. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody wants to be on the railroad track. Mm-hmm. I can't blame him either. It's beautiful. So at any rate, she sold it, and those people became very, very dear friends. Now that building belongs to the college. It's the one right next to the tennis courts.
It's
you know where the
for Change House.
Pardon me?
Is it a little white house?
It's a little white house, and there's a stream.
Athletic outreach.
And there's a stream that runs right next to it, and then across from the stream is the tennis courts.
Yeah, I think that's Women's Athletic Outreach, or it's a theater house.
Yeah, it's a nice little house.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nice little house.
So how did you feel about the college being in the town? I know that there were a lot of people that didn't really approve of it.
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, Lord, no. Well, at least not to my knowledge. No, I mean, let me put it this way. I like conversations. I like to talk to people that are intelligent, and I like to not necessarily argue, but share ideas and stuff like that. Because I'm very peaceful. I'm not interested in the ordinary stuff. I mean, who's married to who's cheating on who drank too much. That stuff doesn't turn me on. And having a group of people like this, the college, it's really neat. Like, we went to a church arranged for marriage enrichment, and I believe it's one of the professors over there, John, isn't that terrible? Lynch. Yeah, John Lynch. And we went just the other night. There's another one coming up next week. And that was the sort of thing where we probably had 40 couples from St. Anne's sitting around. He gives his basic presentation, and then we talk. And it was just, I mean, it's the sort of thing that I like very much. And you don't get that unless you have, learning institution nearby.
So why do you think Ashland doesn't expand? Why do you think it's still this small town?
Well, in truth, it is expanding. Of course, that's like so many other things. A lot of the people don't want to have Ashland changed. And that's all well and good if that's the way you feel. But times are changing. How do I say it? It used to be, well, for example, when I was in Japan, man, I didn't talk to my parents for 2 years. It was impossible. I couldn't. I mean, there was no way I could. Today, I mean, if I were in Iraq, Lord, I could be on the phone. If I knew what I was doing, I could be on the phone every day and talk to them. See, we're becoming a global society. Things are changing. So even though you might want to not let it happen, it's going to happen, and it is happening. You just don't necessarily recognize it. Take language, for example. French. French used to be the language that you had to know for international travel. That's no longer true. And the reason for it is the purists have stunted its growth because they want to keep it the way it was. So now they don't have the words. Well, for example, the English language, the last authoritative dictionary that came out was 470,000 words. I mean, you can explain anything in English. It's amazing.
How about the race issues in Ashland?
I don't know that there is any. There may be, but frankly, I'm not aware of it. And well, there again, when I was in school, when I say school, I'm talking elementary school, junior high school, and even into high school. I lived in areas where there were very few black or African American or whatever you want to call them. And the ones that I remember best were the outstanding ones. Ithaca is where I ended up going to high school, for example. And there were two black families. Let's see if I can remember the name. The one was the guy that I was in school with was a very slender black man, and the family name was one of the royalty of the kingdom that was in what is now Libya. So I have no idea. I've forgotten his name. Wonderful guy. Very intelligent, just extremely intelligent, and fun to know. And then there was another black family, and these were big fellas, hulking, and handsome devils. But whereas the one family excelled academically, these people were the athletes. And captain of the football team, captain of the tennis, and wonderful guys. The sports type was always president of the class. See, so at any rate, I mentioned that to you. So I never had anything. There was nothing problematic about that when I was coming up. So I'm not aware. I guess maybe I'm not in tune. It may be here, but I'm not aware of it.
What about the politics in Ashland? I know there was a big problem when Walmart were building.
Oh, there again, it's like I mentioned about French. The Walmart, a lot of people would argue with me, and that's fine. But as far as I'm concerned, I mentioned business is my background. They do a superb job. They charge low prices, comparatively speaking, and they pay reasonable wages. And the way a business is sustainable, you take in a certain amount of money and you cover your expenses and you make a reasonable profit. Walmart is ideal. If we didn't have a Walmart, you would be paying higher prices. And a basic flaw. Mankind, there is a basic flaw, and that is that you can't expect to take more out of a situation than you put into it. It will not work. That's why currently we are just drowned in indebtedness, the country, and quite honestly, we're destroying ourselves as a result. Talk about the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. We're on our way down. I don't know. Do you ever tune into YouTube? Okay, there was a really good thing on. Believe me, I'm a dinosaur. I'm not very good on this stuff, but YouTube had a wonderful thing on entitled "Did You Know?" Here's just one statistic out of this. It's mind-boggling information. China has more children in through the high school age that are what we would consider exceptional intelligence, honor roll material, way, way up there. They have more of those than we have children in the United States at all levels. See? China and India and Brazil are three major countries that are really on the growth. And quite honestly, we are so insular, we don't even realize that we're not holding our own. We spend 10 times as much money to pull kids up as we do on helping the ones that are way up there excel. Now, I have no problem with helping kids up, but I think at least it should be 50-50. Why penalize a guy because he's got intelligence? Sure, help the one that is not as fast, no question. But don't penalize the one that really can do something. All you got to do is walk around and look at the professionals. I mean, the influx of doctors from India is incredible. And the reason is we're not training them here. The talent is there. It's just we're not doing a very good job of it. Okay. Brings tears to my eyes.
Okay, so back to Ashland.
You really like Ashland, don't you?
I have to.
Of course.
Now, what about all the places like the Iron Horse now and the Ashland Coffee and Tea?
Mm-hmm.
Do they contribute to the community
yes.
here?
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in how the Iron Horse did what they did. They years ago, when I first was exposed to this area, any place that sold alcohol. Of course, we went through a real throes there. Initially, it was brown bagging, and then you could buy beer, and it was ABC on, ABC off, and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of ridiculous regulations, ridiculous from my point of view. At any rate, then when liquor by the drink came in, any place that could sell attracted, initially, it attracted people who, frankly, spent more than enough time in the bar. And that turned off people who like to go in and have a sociable drink. The way the Iron Horse did it, they opened up mainly as a restaurant that served alcohol. They didn't open up as a bar serving alcohol and you could buy something to eat. In other words, the emphasis was different. As a result, they ended up not attracting, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but people who spend too much time in the bar. They didn't attract them. They attracted people who wanted to have a sociable drink and have something good to eat. Quite honestly, part of that was that they deliberately priced a little higher because a guy who's going to drink 14 beers is going to look for the one that's cheapest. Somebody who's going to ask for a cocktail, what's a few cents?
How about in the carnivals here? I was a witness of the Christmas carnival and then some other.
Those are neat, like the Strawberry Festival.
Oh, yes.
That's wonderful. Quite honestly, I'm not as involved with it as I used to be. One year, I've forgotten when this was, but one year they hired me to be a strawberry. This is no kidding. So what I did, let's see. Do you know the banding metal that's used to bind bales of cotton or bales of paper together? It's I'd say it's roughly a ½ inch wide. It's about the size of this kind of tape, maybe a little bit narrower, and it's real springy. Mm-hmm. So what I did is I found that, and I created a strawberry-shaped thing that I could hang around my neck. See, so the top of the strawberry would be my shoulders, and then it would come down. It was kind of tight around, but loose. And then a friend of mine who built costumes for Barksdale created a strawberry cloth. And then I had a green thing that I put on my head. And I went over and walked around as a strawberry. I only did it one year. It was terribly hot. But it was kind of fun.
How about you said that you've been Santa for
47 years.
47 years.
Yeah, yeah. I started out when I was working over at Barksdale. And this is how it got started. A friend of mine was managing a place called Azalea Mall, which is on the north side, or was on the north side of Richmond. And we had a professional, semi-professional, I'm not sure what level they were, football team in the area at that point. I've forgotten the name of it. But at any rate, she had hired the linebacker to play Santa. And just incidentally, the history of why we have Santas in malls and stuff like that is fascinating. But at any rate, she had hired this linebacker. The first day, on his first 15-minute break, he got up, went out to take his break, and never came back. We joked about it that he couldn't face that line. But at any rate, she called me up, desperate, and would I please come down and play Santa? And I said I didn't want to. It's like I mentioned to you earlier, I didn't want to be in the position of lying to a child. And if he said, "Are you Santa?" At that point, I didn't feel comfortable saying yes. So at any rate, I did it on the condition that she would find somebody to replace me. And of course, she told me she tried, but I know darn well she didn't, because little kids like me, and I like little kids. And so I was battling how on earth I avoid this question. See, and then Bill Thalheimer Sr. Thalheimer stores now closed, unfortunately, but really, really nice gentleman. And he saw me work with children, and he asked me if I would come down and work for him. And I told him I really didn't want to for this reason. And he worked on me, and he won. So it ended up that I wrote a little book entitled There Really Is a Santa Claus, and it defines Santa as anybody who gives or does simply because they love, and secondarily hides their identity by using the name St. Nicholas or Santa Claus so that they can't be repaid. So in effect, there are many. That way, with this little book, when a little kid said, "Are you Santa?" I could say yes and be perfectly truthful. So I ended up working for them for, gosh, seems like forever. Then when Thalheimer's closed, I merged with Miller and Rhodes. The two Santas merged. And I stuck with them for a few years, but their method of operation was a little bit different than what I like. My objective in playing Santa was to teach a child to be selfless, because I think that is the answer to the world's problems. The motivation, quite honestly, as I saw it, on the part of the Miller and Rhodes operation, and what, I don't want to even use the name, what has followed as a result, the offspring of the Miller and Rhodes operation, was more concerned, in my opinion, with selling pictures, and that bothered me, so I stopped. Now I have a number of places that I go. Country Club of Virginia, good gracious, I'm going up there. I'll be there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times next December. It's gotten to the point now where in January I'll be getting calls to fill up my December schedule. I'm serious. Because they like how I do it, and they want to make sure I'm going to be there. And I love it. It's hard work, but I tell you, kids are wonderful, just wonderful.
What did he ask you?
Oh, Lord, incredible questions, all kinds of things. And I have devised several little ways of dealing with it. Let's see. I don't want to take too much of your time.
No.
But for example, well, here's one. This is a recollection. It's kind of neat. I was the Virginia Press Association had asked me to appear with. Nobody knew I was going to be there at an annual dinner. So I walk in costume. And Santa, it was wonderful. And but the owner of the restaurant knew because the person who had arranged it had told him. So he had brought his little boy in, and the little boy is sitting at the bar. Everybody else is back in the dining room. Well, the little kid was cute as could be, a little boy, and he was not going to be fooled. So he said, "You don't know who I am, Santa." I said, "Oh, yes, I do." He said, "All right, tell me my name." I said, "No way on earth." I said, "You doubt me? I'm not going to cooperate with you. No way. I'll tell you one thing, though. I not only know your name, I know how to spell it. I bet you don't." He said, "I do too." I said, "Prove it." He said, "Bobby." So I didn't use his name right away. And then we chatted for a little bit. And then finally I said, "Well, see you later, Bob." "Oh, I wasn't going to tell you your name." He said, "How did you know my name?" Little kids are funny like that. I mean, you can do all sorts of things with them. And I don't do it, believe me, I don't do it just because it's fun to fool them. That's not the point. What I want to do is I want to get them to like me so much that they really listen to me when I'm telling the important things. One thing, this is just a technique that I use occasionally. Everybody, kids, think I know everything. And I don't know everything, but I know how to learn very rapidly. For example, there's a line, and one of the little kids will start pushing, and the mother will say, "John, for goodness sake, stop pushing your sister." Well, I'll look up, so I'm not looking directly at anybody. I'll say, "John, I'll be right with you." Little head will go up. So now I know the name, and I know who it belongs to. See? So then, and of course, it's short-term memory. But I can memorize 10 or 15 of these little kids when it occurs. And then when they come up, bam, it's there. Or sometimes what I do is I'll play one against the other. Like, let's say the two of you come in to see me. I'll look at you and I'll say, "Has she been good?" And then you will use her name. Say, "Oh, yes, so-and-so." What is it, Paloma? Plamena. And but you'll say, "Oh, Plamena is very nice." And then I'll say, "Well, Plamena, that's nice. How about her? Was she good?" It's kind of neat playing these little games with them. But then one of the things that I do, I try very, very hard never to lie to them. For example, here's one that I never get to say the whole thing, but a little kid will say, "Do you mean to tell me that you visit every house on Christmas Eve?" I'll say, "Now, that's something, this really upsets me. Everybody thinks that I visit all the houses in 24 hours. That is absolutely not true. Look, actually, it's 48 hours that is Christmas, because the instant it starts, it's only 1 second, but it's the day, okay? And then what I do, I won't go into the actual numbers, but I quote the circumference of the earth, how long it takes to go. Therefore, you're traveling at 17.9 miles per minute. And if you travel at half that speed, then as you're going around, It's moving and moving and moving and moving and moving. And you end up on the last second, which is 24 hours later than the first second. So it's actually a 48-hour period that it is December 25th somewhere in the world. But the point is, I said it's not true. Mm-hmm. And then I explained how it could be if it were true. Mm-hmm. See? And then the little kids will go away with the illusion that it's true, but I haven't lied to them. Mm-hmm. There are several things like that I, just getting to a little kid. For example, another thing too, this is kind of interesting. Some little kid, particularly in an area like this where there's deer hunting, they'll say, "How come your deer are all male?" I'd say, "Oh, they're not." "Well, they all have antlers." See, because there is only one of the rangifers, and that's deers, elk, all that sort of stuff. There's only one of them where both the male and the female have antlers, and that's the cervidee. Now they are called caribou in North America, but in Siberia, where they originated from, they would be called Siberian reindeer. Okay? Well, the thing is, they're the only ones where both the male and the female have antlers. This is the intriguing part about it. The male drops his antlers normally around the 1st of November, so he wouldn't have antlers during December. The female doesn't drop her antlers. Of course, they grow them fresh every year. But she doesn't drop hers until after she's had her fawn in the spring. So knowledgeable kids, if they know this, see, then they'll say, "Well, how come they all got antlers?" And I'd say, "Look, they drop their antlers as of November. But we are so busy during November and December, all of our photo ops are earlier in the year." So what I'm doing is I'm taking bona fide information and using it to create an illusion that's attractive, but I do it in a way that I'm not lying. Mm-hmm. But I'm not destroying the illusion. I'm creating it. It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun.
It must be.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And what are your Christmas traditions? How do you celebrate Christmas?
Oh.
You and Erhard also.
Oh well. I'm so tied up with the going out different places, the playing Santa, that with the exception of what we do at home, I'm not involved in anything like that. One of the things that is very traditional, of course, Santa rides around on the fire truck, and for years they always make a point of coming by and seeing me. Mm-hmm. And which is kind of neat. It really is. Oh, this is something. This is terrible. Talk about. Yeah. When I tell you this, it's going to sound egotistical, and but it is kind of amusing. As you know, I've written 3 books. I'm working on another one right now, but there was an article in the paper. A gal had written a book, trying to think of her last name. I think it's Rice or something like that. At any rate, she had written a book called The Chambermaid, and she had come to Virginia for a signing, and was interviewed by the Times-Dispatch. So one morning, I read the paper every morning, picked it up, and there's this interview, and I thought, well, interesting. So I read it. And she said that she really, really was delighted to be back visiting Richmond because she had lived here when she was a little girl, and she had wonderful memories about Richmond. And specifically, she said, my family used to go to Miller and Rhodes Tea Room to see Santa Claus. And then we go across the street to Tallharmer's to see the real Santa. in that it's terrible but that pleased me, and so I showed it to my wife and Sib's quite a bit younger than I, and I'm a dinosaur when it comes to emails and stuff like that, but she emailed the girl, and and actually I sent her copies of the Santa books, and she came right back with a copy of her book and was telling me specific recollections about seeing me and all that sort of stuff, which is really kind of neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tell you, it's been an exciting life.
It definitely sounds like it.
Yeah, and it's not over.
Oh.
I got a lot more to do.
What are you working on right now, if it's not a secret?
No, it's not. Having lived, see, I've been very exposed to Japan, very exposed to Southeast Asia as a result of this abduction. Somewhat familiar with Africa. That's where the kids were. That's where we got them back from. They were in what is now Zimbabwe. It was Rhodesia then, and wonderful country then. Mugabe has just decimated it. It's goes beyond sinful. At any rate, so I'm aware of a lot of things internationally, and I feel a great responsibility to try to do something. Sorry. Mahatma Gandhi once said, if we're ever to have real peace in the world, we must start with the children. And what I'm doing is I'm writing a book. It's 49 letters. Santa, who lives at the North Pole, writes to St. Nicholas in Bari, Italy. And he says, it's obvious that you and I are headed in the same direction, have the same interests. Don't you think it would be kind of neat to sit down, talk it over, and try to be a little more effective? Nicholas writes back, great idea, love it. So in the course of 49 letters, what they do is they exchange background. Everybody knows about St. Nicholas. Very few people know really what happened in terms of Santa. See, Santa's a youngster. He didn't come into existence until 1653. And Nicholas, of course, is 1,667 years old. See, he was born December 6, 343. At any rate, then what they do is they discuss their objectives. And it turns out the unstated objective is identical. And that is a world at peace where every individual has an equal opportunity for fulfillment. No guarantees, just the opportunity. But they're approaching it from different points of view. And then they decide that really it's almost a waste of time targeting adults. Let's target children. And how are we going to do it? And that's what I discussed or mentioned to you earlier about how these three books come together. Because what you're doing is you're encouraging this child to ask 4 questions. Is there a Santa? Yes. Is there more than one? Yes. Are you one? Yes. May I be one? Yes. And what you're doing is you're helping that child transcend from the pleasure of selfish receiving to the pleasure of selfless giving. And this is crucially important because when you get groups of people working together to accomplish a purpose, if they are all acting in terms of what is good for me, you end up with strife. If they think in terms of what is good for us, then things can happen. See? So that is what I am trying to accomplish. And how I do it is I make this imaginary world so attractive that a little kid can't stand it. He's got to be a part of it. See? And you make him want to give. And then you lead him into an understanding of why this is important. We were talking earlier about marriages. There are 2 people involved. There's a me and a them. The two spouses. But actually what's important is it's the we. It's the both of them together. And this, let me put it this way. There was an excellent book written by an Australian years and years and years ago. And what he said, and I'm paraphrasing it, but it's basically correct. What he said was that of all the governments in the past and current, there is no method of government more laced with greed than democracy as currently practiced. Because the voter invariably votes for self-interest, and the heck with everybody else. So you end up where a beautiful concept that everybody votes to take an action in a direction that's going to be good for everybody ends up actually not being very efficient. But the problem is not the system. The problem is the individual. So what I'm thinking is if I can train children to look beyond them, then maybe I can have an influence. So at any rate, then Nick comes back and he says, this is a pretty good idea, getting to the kids and teaching them to be selfless. And you as a Protestant, me as a Catholic, we can hit roughly 1/3 of the people in the world, but what about the other 2/3? And Santa says, you like to read, I like to read. You're not aware of it, but there are 67 of us. And there are 67 gift givers in the world. And they cut across all lines, be they religious, ethnic, whatever. And all of them basically have the same objective, and that is training children to be better people. So Nick comes back and says, gosh, if that's true, why don't we create an organization? Okay, what do we call it? Well, St. Francis of Assisi wrote a beautiful prayer one time, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. So why don't we take that and say, let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with us. And it's the us is the 67 gift givers. And then what we will do is we will hopefully acquaint children and hopefully get the cooperation of the adults and move in that direction. So now, of course, this is all the initial reaction of people is say, but that's against human nature. It's not going to happen. Well, the culmination of the book brings it back to reality. Because Nicholas, who is over 1,600 years old, says, he says to Santa, I've reviewed the plan. There's absolutely no question in my mind. It is brilliant. It could work. But after 1,600 years of limited success, I tend to be skeptical. Do you think it'll happen? And then Santa comes back to him, and it comes back to Nick and says, look, I told you at the outset, I'm not a human. I've never been a human. I've always been a spirit. But I understand humans, and this is how they function. They adopt an objective. They start working towards that objective. Every day, little victories, little defeats, little victories, little defeats. They may have to alter their objectives slightly en route, but as long as they persist, they will overcome. Immediately, there will be that feeling of euphoria. I did it. Then it'll be like the song. Is that all there is? So, will we attain a world at peace where everyone has an equal opportunity for fulfillment? Probably not. But, as it's been said many, many times, the trip is the reward. And those of us will have a great deal of satisfaction out of knowing that we've moved in that direction. So, that's it. And I'm hoping it'll be good.
Oh, I'm sure it will be.
Yeah. Lord knows if I have anything to say about it, it's going to be. Yeah, but it's just, I'm sorry I got a little emotional, but I feel pretty strongly.
Yeah. Not many people do, that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
About it. Thank you so much.
Oh, certainly.
For this. This was incredibly nice.
Good.
Of you. Yes.